Welcome to the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. Today, my guest is Joyce Tischler. Joyce currently teaches the fundamentals of animal law, survey course, and industrial animal agriculture law, and is co-authoring with Bruce Myers and Sonia Wiseman, a casebook on industrial animal agriculture law. Joyce works closely with students, oversees full semester legal writing projects, and is co-advisor to the student animal law group at Lewis and Clark. Joyce continues to lecture on animal law and industrial animal law on a worldwide basis. Joyce has had a pivotal role in launching the field we now know as animal law and is affectionately referred to as the mother of animal law. Joyce also founded the Animal League Defense Fund, the first nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting animals through the legal system. Stick around. I want to introduce her to you. Hi, Joyce. How are you?
Hi, Nancy. Good to be with you today.
It's so nice to have you. I am so proud to have you on the Vegan Pulse because, as I was just mentioning to you, when I saw that you were the founder of Animal League Defense Fund, I thought, oh my gosh, she's one of my heroes
Ah,
because I think that organization does such great work and we need to support it. And we'll talk about that later. Right now, let's talk about you and your journey into veganism.
well, my journey into veganism is, I think, symbolic of where a lot of people, or how a lot of people journey into veganism. I didn't do it all at once, not by a long shot. I became a vegetarian after I read Peter Singer's first edition of Animal Liberation. It came out in 1975. I was in law school, and that's when I stopped eating all forms of meat. But I wasn't willing to give up dairy for a long time. And I was in denial. I didn't, I put mufflers over my ears, la, 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 sang loudly and didn't want to hear about the dairy industry and how terribly it hurts those animals. So I just didn't do it. I just felt like, being a vegetarian is enough. And then three little calves changed that. I was the CEO of Animal Legal Defense Fund. We were in our office in Petaluma, California. Now, Petaluma, California used to be the chicken egg capital of California. It's a town that still has dairy farms, has cattle ranches, beef cattle ranches, still raises chickens. There's a slaughterhouse at the north end of town and at the south end of town. It's a town that has changed a lot because people like me, city people, have moved in there, but it still retains a lot of its rural nature. And one day we were in the office doing our work as usual, and a dairy farmer, drove up and left his truck in our parking lot so he could go to the bank. And in the back of the truck were three really sad looking calves, male calves, who were on their way to the slaughterhouse. And someone in my office looked out, saw the calves just hanging their heads and standing there. They were probably a day or two old, these calves. And so we got the petty cash box, and we had $140 in there. And we waited for the farmer to come back, and we said, "We'd like to buy these calves from you," which was crazy. What we're going to do with three calves. And he said, "Oh, you could have them. I could bring you three a week." And that broke my heart, thinking that these were just three of many, many calves we were brought to slaughter. So I called my husband. I said, "You need to get over to the feed store, get a whole bunch of hay." And we brought them home in my car. And we had this little outdoor house right outside our house. So we put the calves in there, lots of hay. And we then spent the next week doing a crash course on how hard it is to keep three dairy calves alive when they have not been fed colostrum. Because when calves are born, their immune systems are not fully developed, and they desperately need the colostrum from their mothers. And of course, in the dairy industry, they're separated from their mothers immediately, sometimes 15 minutes after birth, sometimes a day after birth. Some of them may have gotten some colostrum these guys, one seemed like he was stronger, the other two did not. So he might have fed before they were separated from their mothers, which is part of the tragedy of the dairy system, separating babies from their mothers and everything else that's done to those mother cows. At any rate, here we had three calves. Uh, they got sick almost immediately. We had to have the vet come out. I know small animal medicine because I've lived with dogs and cats, but knew nothing about dairy calves, and it was very stressful. Trying to keep them going, trying to keep them happy, trying to keep them healthy, which we couldn't. They were just going to get sick. They were really prone to disease and infection. And I contacted Jean Bauer, who was at the New York Farm Sanctuary, but was driving back across the country to the California Farm Sanctuary. And he said, "Yeah, we'll take the calves, but it's going to be a few days. Can you keep them alive?" And I can't tell you, it became very personal. I did not want those calves to die on my watch. My daughter and my daughter was a little girl then, we would take a book out to the calves and all sit in the hay, and we would read to them at night. We'd read stories to them. And we were doing everything possible to keep them alive, including running around town and getting milk from cows what were they called? I can't remember what they were called, but they were cows who were being um, given antibiotics or being treated for some sort of infection. And we were getting that milk and bringing it back to the calves so that they'd have some, mother's milk. Any rate, Jane finally did get back to Farm Sanctuary. My daughter and I drove 3 hours to there and brought these calves to them. They were all still alive. One of them died soon after. The other two lived into adulthood and have a good life. So as I said, it became very personal. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to walk my talk. I had to go beyond being vegetarian, and I did. I became a vegan, um, and have been ever since. That was in the mid '90s, so I've been vegan ever since. And you know, my path to veganism was the emotional response to these beautiful babies, and um, and it continues to be. And we all go to the market, and we all at some point or another have to walk by that display of dead carcasses, and then we walk by the milk and the eggs and the all of that, and we walk to where we can eat, the section of the market where we can get our vegan products that haven't killed anybody, that allow us to have peace on our plate, in a world that really doesn't support that. Some years ago, I went on a vegan cruise. Have you ever done that?
No,
Uh,
I would like to, though. I see them come and go.
um, I was invited to speak on a vegan cruise, and so it started in England, went through the North Sea, and then went through the Norwegian fjords. It was a beautiful, beautiful place. I'm not a big fan of cruises. I will say that I prefer to travel on land at my own pace, but I have to say it was unbelievable to be on a ship with 1,000 people, and every piece of food was vegan. It it was
Heaven,
it
heaven.
was heaven. It felt like, so this is what the world could be like if it were vegan. That we had the buffet and everything was vegan, and we'd had this sit down dinner with 5 courses and soup and dessert and the main course, and it was all deliciously cooked vegan food. And I was in heaven. I thought, oh my goodness, I'm so glad to have experienced that, because you know how hard it is for us. You go into a restaurant. Now I'm in Portland, Oregon, and Portland, Oregon is a really good place to be a vegan because
Heaven.
most yeah, most restaurants have vegan options, and there are so many really wonderful vegan restaurants. I went to one just the other night, Sri Lankan, fully vegan food, and Israeli vegan food, and African, different countries. I mean, there are a lot of places here to get vegan food, but it's not easy to be vegan. The world is constantly telling you that you're the weirdo, the odd bird, the fire eating vegan who's telling everybody what to do. And I don't like to tell everybody what to do. I just wish people were more respectful that this is the way I eat. I do this because I don't wish to kill, I don't wish to harm, and I think it's a very healthy way to eat. And Dr. Michael Greger supports me in that. I love his website. I learn a lot there.
So on the calves, it's such a sad story. It gave me goosebumps to know that you walked out there with your petty cash trying to save these three calves, and unfortunately one of them passed. But wow, to those other two calves, you were a lifesaver, and the fact that you were saying how they need their mother's milk, and it's taken away from them because they need it, because they're not fully developed and they need it to survive.
Right.
And when you hear vegetarians talk about, like, they might feel that it's good enough, but I don't think they're still missing the point that it really isn't good enough, because the calves still, you're taking the milk from the calves,
Yeah.
and not that's one thing. And the second, that you're also making that mother live a torturous life before it is killed. It's still going to be killed.
Yeah, she's going to be killed after a few years when she could have had a life of 15 to 20 years in a more natural setting. She's going to have baby after baby after baby taken from her, which is heartbreaking. Those babies are sent to slaughter or they're put in intensive confinement. And then, the females are brought back into the herd and the males are sold for veal. It's a horrible industry. It's a dirty, ugly industry.
It's a
And
murderous industry.
yeah, and it needs to end. And that that's what I work on now from a legal perspective. When I was with Animal Legal Defense Fund and building the animal law movement, I worked on it from the perspective of let's bring litigation and see how many different ways we can attack this industry. Now what I do is I teach. I teach a course called Industrial Animal Agriculture Law. I don't like to call those places factory farms because it reinforces that they're somehow farms. They're not. That's not a farm. What they are is industrial factories. The Environmental Protection Agency calls them concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. And that's the term I use with my students. Environmental law students know that term well. And I teach them from every aspect how to challenge this CAFO system. So I teach them, first of all, how did this come about? What caused it to come about? What supports it? The farm bill and the subsidies and the tax breaks, all the things that support this system. And then I, of course, teach them how the animals are treated in the system, all the things that are done to them, the intensive confinement, the crowding, the mutilations such as debeaking, dehorning, castration without anesthesia or painkillers. And it goes on and on and on as to the horrible things done to the animals. But I don't stop there because I want them to know this system of raising animals is unsustainable if those CAFOs had to internalize the costs that they don't. And by that, I mean, they pollute the air, they pollute the water, they degrade the soil, and they don't pay for any of that. The taxpayers, you and I pay for that.
I don't
Let's
want
make
to.
I don't want to. Let's force them to internalize those costs. And then I teach my students about the environmental injustice. In North Carolina, there are more pigs than there are people. And those pigs have almost all, been placed in the eastern part of the state. Who's in the eastern part of the state? Poor Black people, poor Native Americans. White people, no, no, those pigs are not where the white people and the golf club, courses, the golf courses are. No, they're placed in areas where people are poor, lifetime of poverty, harder to get any political help. And so there's an environmental justice issue. Then there's the workers. They're treated not a lot better than the animals. Food safety issues, the overuse of antibiotics. It goes on and on and on. And I want my students to understand all aspects of this horrific system so that they can attack from every aspect and bring it down.
And I hope that people understand that these individuals who run these farming
CAFOs. And
CAFOs
it's
are not nice people. They're bullying people as
yeah,
well, for the most part, because like you were saying, the soil, but also the wildlife around them, right? Because they feel that they could take the water from wildlife, so that they could kill any other animal around. So, to me, I'm not saying. I'm just saying that they're a bullying bunch. Sorry,
The
not sorry.
CAFO, no, sorry, yeah, the CAFO industry is corporations, massive corporations who pushed out the family farmers in the 70s and 80s. So you've got Smithfield, Tyson, Purdue, JBS. That's who the CAFO industry is. These are massive, wealthy international corporations. And the CAFO industry started in the US, but now China's raising 10 times as many animals as we are. It's all over the world. It's in Australia, it's in New Zealand, it's all throughout Europe. It's going into Africa now. It's entering Africa. I teach students from various parts of the world, and I particularly want the students in underdeveloped countries, African countries, to understand this is heading your way. It's not inevitable that your country has to accept this system. Understand what it is and fight against it. So
And it's very important for all of us to fight against it, because you see some poor farmer, poor rancher, whatever, and then a catastrophe comes and all their animals are left behind, chained, closed off. You see them floating, you see the pictures of them floating because they love their animals so much. No,
yeah,
because they could just put in a little file and get money for them, and it's just the same for them.
all
And
that insurance. Yeah.
as I was saying, I don't want to pay my taxes to go to this horrible industry. And we just need to find the ways, little by little, step by step, until we get to where we need to get to.
And we have lots of different ways. My way is teaching law students to go out there and challenge this with lawsuits and with legislation. But there are other ways. There's the education route. There's what you're doing. There's the demonstrations and the protests. There's the undercover investigations. Those have been extraordinarily helpful in showing people what the conditions in these places are. There are other things as well. There's the alt meat and alt dairy industry. 20% of the milk market is now alt milk. It's the coconut and the oat and the soy and the rice and the almond and the cashew. Wow, 20% of the industry, 20% is now being fed to people who won't drink cow's milk. That's incredible. That's incredible. We need to bring it to 40%.
Yeah, well, I think it's because I think the percentage was 60% of the population can't drink. They're lactose intolerant.
I think
The minorities and the people of color, but I think it was around that level.
I think in the African American population, that's a figure I've heard. I'm lactose intolerant. I don't know about you. My daughter's lactose intolerant.
I am too. So
yeah, I stopped drinking milk.
And you were just saying, you just mentioned before, just recently, I'm sure that you probably saw the Smithfield trial with direct action, Wayne Xiong.
Yeah,
which I watched the courtroom drama unfold, and I couldn't believe it. And I guess the bottom line was when the representative for Smithfield compared a piglet to a can of dented peas. And that's exactly what we need to remember, is that for farmers, these ranchers, they don't care about the animals. To them, it's just something they make money out of that they could exploit. That's all.
Yeah, they're machines, they're widgets. And we need to teach people that that's not normal. When you see a CAFO, the inside of a CAFO, and 20,000 turkeys are in there, or 20,000 chickens and 10,000 turkeys in another one, that's not normal. Each of those beings is an individual with a gestalt, a life force, preferences, needs, emotions. I love to go to farm sanctuaries or farmed animal sanctuaries, because I say that feeds my soul. Hang out with the pigs, hang out with the turkeys, let them teach you who they are, not what they are. And twice a year, we take the students at the law school on a Saturday. We take them to a work party at a local sanctuary. And you should see us all. We are ear to ear grinning.
That's awesome.
Walking out the barns and cleaning the chicken coops and hanging out with these amazing animals. It's just really, it's food for my soul. And I'm so happy when I go to these places. I recommend highly that everybody go to sanctuaries for farmed animals, because you will learn so much just by sitting on the ground and watching the turkeys do what they do, or the chickens, or the pigs, or the cows. These cows who are so big. They're as big as horses because they were bred to grow fast so they could be sold, at 18, 20 months for beef. Well, now they're 5 years old and they're just enormous and so sweet. So you know,
Animals are individuals.
yeah.
I was just so, with everything going on and life is so hectic. And I said, I just need to get a little time away. So my friend Tamara has a sanctuary here in New Mexico, in Tijeras Sanctuary of the Caruna. And I said, can I come up and just visit with the animals? And she, of course, she said, yes, of course, come on up. And it was just wonderful to just walk around. And I think one of the cocks, though, however, was trying to flirt with me. He was making his, and she was saying, he doesn't really go close to anybody, so he must like you, and stuff like that. So I was like, me.
Yeah, right. The
Because
rooster has good taste.
because you get to notice that they're little individuals. They have their own personalities, and if you just take the time to understand that they're like, I like to say it like this. It's like if you went into a room and it was full of, let's say, Asian individuals or African individuals who only spoke African or, Asian, and you went in there and you don't know that language. It doesn't make them less than you or you less than them. They just speak a different language, and you just got to make an effort to know it, and then you can communicate and have a wonderful relationship. And I think that that's what we need to do with animals, to understand that, sure, they don't have arms and legs like us, but they have their own little soul, their own little lives. They have what they like, what they don't like, and we should be respectful of every living being, not just the ones we want to choose to do so.
Yeah, yeah. And that's one of the life lessons of, viewing everyone as an individual and realizing what's not normal. Cow's milk is the normal food for calves, okay? It is not the normal food for human beings. And human beings do not need milk as they become adults. As babies, sure, but their babies need mother's milk, their mother's milk, not a cow's mother's milk. My child was fed mother's milk. She was not fed cow's milk, and she grew up to be very healthy and happy.
That's awesome. And the other thing is, a lot of people, I didn't get it until recently, oh, I can't have soy. I can't have soy. I got to cut down on soy. Well, here's the flash news. Animals are fed mostly corn and soy. So if you
Yeah.
want to really stop consuming soy, stop eating animal flesh.
Yeah. I mean, veganism is the answer to a lot. It's certainly the answer to the animal abuse, exploitation, and suffering. Um, I don't know if there's a heaven, but I think hell is every slaughterhouse that has ever existed, and hell is every CAFO in which animals are being abused and exploited. That clearly is hell. And how do we end that? Um, and the simplest, most straightforward way to do it is to become vegan. But I get impatient sometimes because we've all been talking about this for a long time now, and what are we still, just 2% of the population? So how do we get to that other 98%? And I'm sure you ask yourself that question. I've been asking myself that question for many years. Excuse me, my coffee's. How do we bring in those other 98%? I mentioned Gene Bauer, and Gene is one of the most effective speakers I know, because he doesn't, he's not the fire breathing vegan. He's not pounding on the table and telling you, you've got to be vegan because you're a terrible person if you're not. Now, it doesn't work with most people.
No.
How do we embrace them? How do we bring them in? How do we help them to see that this lifestyle is good for the animals? Yes, it's also good for your own health. It's good for the planet, because the CAFO system is a major contributor to climate change. If we really wanted to tackle climate change, the first thing we would do is eliminate animal agriculture, because animal agriculture produces a lot of toxins, but one of them is methane. And if we could get control of methane, that would give us a lot more time to be able to tackle CO2. I'm not sure if people understand that. And
Well,
it's really sad because, again, it would be the easy answer, but you know, most of my friends, most of my family, they're carnivores or
mine
they're
too.
moving towards vegetarianism. I love them. I don't want to separate from them. They respect what I do, and yet there's that wall that I can't do that. That's too difficult. I love my steak. I mean, I've heard every excuse in the book. A friend of mine says I don't thrive if I don't eat meat. What am I supposed to say to that? I want you to thrive. I've thrived for many years without any meat whatsoever and without any dairy and eggs and any of that. Well, I eat dairy. I eat soy dairy or coconut dairy or almond dairy, almond yogurt. And
Yeah.
what's wonderful, and I'm sorry, I'm jabbering on. What's wonderful is, 20, 30 years ago, if you wanted to eat vegan, remember those little bitty hot dogs in the can? They were disgusting. But today, some people don't like the faux burgers like Impossible Burger or Beyond Meat. I happen to like those. I don't eat them too much because it's processed food, and I try to keep my body away from the processed food. I'm turning 70 next year. I want to keep going for a while. So for me, it's organics and fruits and vegetables, and limit my carbs and limit the processed foods. But if you put a Beyond Burger in front of me, it's going to get eaten. Um,
Me
as
too.
chickenless nuggets, whatever. But it becomes so much easier to be vegan, so much easier. I, I walk into a store and I can buy mayonnaise that I can eat. I can buy donuts that are vegan. Oh, I never used to like donuts. Now I love them.
Yeah,
Uh,
and funny that you say that because I was never really a big food appreciated food. I just ate it because I needed it to survive. Not, I ate small portions. I wasn't really thrilled. Since going vegan, I love food. I just can't believe it. It's just my body didn't like those animal products, but now I love food. I love food. I just got to say it again. Love food. Vegan
yeah,
food, that is.
those carnivores, we have this image of the plate and, our dinner plate, and there's a piece of meat, and then there's the chicken, the mashed potatoes, and then there's the peas or the broccoli or whatever. So that's how we picture dinner. And when you become a vegan, the dinner plate looks different. My dinner plate will be quinoa, which I love. And then on top of it, I will have sauteed red peppers and onions and mushrooms and kale. Oh, and that's on top of it. That's a dinner. That is dinner for me. And it's delicious. It's wonderful.
And that's actual real food. I mean, what the carnivores eat, the flesh eaters eat, that's not real food. That's processed. And that's another thing. People say, I don't want to have processed food. There's nothing more processed than
Yeah,
dead animal flesh,
it's
from the
got
color to the smell to its
exactly
composition. So
to the
wake
antibiotics that
up.
are in that animal, to all the chemicals that are in there. Um, that's not real food. You want real food? Have a tomato. You know, have have a pepper. Have mushrooms. That's real food. That's going to help your body to operate at its highest potential. But
And I think the one thing you would say, how can we help move this along? I think that I believe that because I come across people who don't want to tell others that they're vegan because they don't want to, break their, they don't want to feel like a freak or whatever. And I say the opposite. The more we talk about it, the more common it becomes, the
no,
more people hear about it. And when I first went vegan 9 years ago, I was the kind of person because I wanted to repent for having eaten all that flesh for all these years. So I was the one who, at any chance, wanted a vegan. You want to talk about veganism? You want to talk about this? I was just like not shy at all and didn't care who I was, And a lot of times, when I was at dinners and things like that, people would go, "Oh, what are you eating? Your food looks so good," and they wanted what I was eating, even though they had ordered something with flesh on it,
yeah,
and yet they wanted my food.
yeah,
So I think people are just not aware. They're just so conditioned And I think that when we bring it out, when we share it, I think that when we choose our words carefully about what we're talking about, and not accept disrespect for the animals as well. Even if they're friends and family, you could say things without, like you said, being mean or, very abrasive, but you could, say, hey, I'd rather you didn't say that, because that, this is how it looks like to me. This is how I feel about it. And, and just educate the people that are around us, sharing information, because we're our own media. I keep saying that over and over again. Thank goodness for social media. For those that don't like it, I love it, because this is what has gotten us here, is to be able to share our own without being mandated the only things that we could see or participate in. So I love it. I mean, when there's a petition, when Animal League Defense Fund asks for you to sign a petition, sign it. When there's information out there, share it.
Yeah. And I told my story as a way of reminding people that we all started as meat eaters. We all make excuses. It's hard to become a vegan. It's hard to give up that chicken that your mom made every Friday night. It's hard. There's a big emotional element to what we eat. You seem like you were more of a physical eater. I have always been an emotional eater, and there's no emotion that doesn't make me eat. If I'm happy, I eat. If I'm sad, I eat. If I'm frustrated, I eat. I'm an emotional eater. But it took me a long time to really be honest with myself and to say, Joyce, you need to walk your talk. You want to save animals, start with your own plate. And so let's be nurturing. Let's be understanding. Most people who we're going to meet started as meat eaters, and that's so ingrained. And so how do we nurture them? How do we help them, rather than being what I call the fire-breathing vegan, who's pounding and saying, you shouldn't do that? Most people are not going to respond well to that. So how do we bring them along in a more nurturing way? And how do we deal with those who say, I'm not going where you want me to go? And I think that's where we get into the cell-cultivated industry, who are going to be mass producing chicken cells so that you have a chicken patty, but the chicken, was not involved in that. Those people hopefully will respond to the cell-cultivated meat, and eat that. As I think push is going to come to shove. I don't know when it's going to come. Is it going to be 20 years from now, 5 years from now? But with climate change, with all of the destruction that the meat industry and the dairy and egg industries bring to us, people are going to realize we simply can no longer support these industries with our tax dollars. We've got to let them go.
Yeah.
And industries themselves are getting into the production of the alt meats and the plant-based meats. I mean, Tyson and Purdue, they're hedging their bets. Bottom line, at the end of the day, they just want to sell products and make money. And if they see that soy milk is selling, they're going to get into soy milk.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Joyce, thank you so very much for being on the Vegan Pulse. I enjoyed talking to you. I could talk to you for the rest of the day. I swear I can. But perhaps another Vegan Pulse another time. That would be awesome. Thank you. And bye-bye.
Thank you, Nancy. Bye.
Thank you for joining us on another Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas. Remember to like us on Facebook, check out our website, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Live vegan.